Good morning. I'm attorney Mitchell Garabedian, Boston, Massachusetts. To my right is victim Robert Perrone, Ricardo Donovan, an Archdiocesan Boston priest. To my left is Ann Barrett Doyle and Susie Norman, both of bishopaccountability.com. They do great work in tracking the histories of priests. We're here this morning because I released the names of 12 pedophile priests new to my list. 6 of those priests are religious brothers. Actually, 5 priests and 1 religious brother were serving in the Archdiocese of Boston at the time of the abuse. That now brings the number of priests who are serving within the Archdiocese of Boston on my list to 105, spanning decades. The pool of sexual abuse continues to overflow from the Archdiocese of Boston and around the world, damaging victims, their families, parishioners, friends, and the general public. I found it necessary to release this list so that victims can heal, other victims will become empowered, and children will be kept safe. The Archdiocese, for its own reasons, refuses to release a full list. And that's very painful to many victims and unsafe to children and the general public. The victims who were abused on my latest list were abused between 1951 and 1991. About 40 years. They range in age from 34 to 67 years old when they reported the abuse. And when they were abused, they were anywhere from 9 to 17 years old. One victim was sexually molested by Father James H. Lane, a former Boston police chaplain. The Archdiocese of Boston, through its investigators and attorneys, interviewed my client, his 3 brothers, and his 3 brothers. And there was overwhelming corroborative evidence that my client was sexually abused by Father Lane, even though Father Lane was a close family friend. My client had been molested at least 10 times from ages 10 to 11, and then one more time at Father Lane's home in Marshfield at age 15. Father Lane, as I said, was a close family friend. He actually married my client and baptized 2 of his children. And the question is, why did my client come forward? My client came forward because in 2010, he wanted to make peace. And he wanted to make peace so that he could have peace with his religion. He had suffered a heart attack and had triple bypass surgery. And he decided the only way to make peace was to come forward about Father Lane. He had reported the abuse as early as 36 years ago, again 30 years ago. Another brother found out it about 15 years ago. He had told another brother 5 years ago. It was not a secret. Many family members knew. It was very painful for him to come forward. To my right is Robert Perrone. He was molested from ages 9 to 11, approximately 20 times, if not more, by Ricardo Donovan at St. Coleman's Church in Brockton, in the rectory. Father O'Donovan befriended my client because he was bagging groceries in a store near the church in which his mother worked at. And he befriended his mother and Robert will tell you his story about the tragedy that he has had to live with. Over 20 times he was sexually molested by Ricardo Donovan. In each and every one of these cases that I've posted, the victims have been found credible. and the settlements have been either 5 or 6 figures. The determination was not inconclusive. It was that my clients were found credible. There was corroborative evidence and direct evidence. And victims should be extremely proud of coming forward, telling the truth, taking the weight off their shoulders, and healing. For they're not only speaking for themselves, but they're speaking for other victims. As to the other cases, not involving the priest serving in Boston, those priests or brothers were associated with Ohio, New Jersey, and Rhode Island, whether they be dioceses or orders or just religious members of religious organizations. Clergy sexual abuse is international in scope and is ongoing and continuous. Right now, I represent 21 victims who were sexually molested in Haiti in United States District Court in Connecticut. I've filed 20 lawsuits. The perpetrator, Douglas Perlitz, was working at a Jesuit-run institution, which was also overseen by Fairfield University in Malta, the Knights of Malta. Most of those children were molested after 2002, when the National Catholic Conference of Bishops instituted their policies for the safety of children. Douglas Perlitz received a 19-year and 7-month jail sentence for sexually molesting children. I'll have Robert Perrone address you now. Thank you. Any questions first, or do you want?
So are there only 2 new names out of the 12? Is that right?
No, out of the 12, there are actually 7 new names that have never been listed before.
I actually have a list here.
I can give you the names if you want them. Yeah. The names are Brother Peter Claver, Father James H. Lane, Father James Nickel, Father Rickard O'Donovan, Father Leonard Walsh, Brother Vincent Jerome, Father Augustus Scott.
And out of those 7, 2 served in Boston?
Well, actually, there were 5 in Boston, serving in the Archdiocese of Boston. 2 were archdiocesan priests, Father Lane and Father O'Donovan. But when a religious person or a priest works in an archdiocese such as Boston, the Archdiocese of Boston is supposed to be supervising these priests. I have represented 105, I have represented hundreds of victims against 105 priests or religious brothers or members of religious organizations who were working within the Archdiocese of Boston. Any other questions?
Do you know where Brother Jerome worked?
Brother, yes, hold on one second.
New Jersey, right?
Yes, Brother Jerome.
And these are some assignment histories that we put together.
He was at Roselle Catholic High School in Roselle, New Jersey.
Do you know how many of these new names these guys are deceased?
Yes. 1 minute, please.
So if you look on the assignment histories that Susie just passed out, at the end they note death dates for the ones we know are dead.
8 are deceased. Excuse me, 7 are deceased.
Of the 12.
Of the 12. 1 is in Wisconsin, Father Glenn Davidowich. Brother Vincent Jerome is in Florida. We do not know where Brother Robert Burgess is. We do not know where Father Henry Rancourt is. And Father Augustus Scott is in North Carolina. Who is watching them? Nobody knows. That's why the archdiocese and the diocese and the orders around the country have an obligation to list these priests so that the public is made aware and children are kept safe.
Talk a little bit more about Father Lane. You know, come out said he was, you know, a whistleblower, and you know, some people maybe have trouble believing it.
Father Paul Shanley was a whistleblower too. So, given the fact that he was a whistleblower, doesn't mean that he sexually molested children, just as in Father Paul Shanley's case. Again, the archdiocese interviewed my client, reviewed all the records I presented to them, interviewed the 3 brothers of my client, and one brother was even 15 years younger than my client. And they came to the conclusion that he was credible. He came forward because he wanted to make peace with his Lord, as he stated.
How old is your client now, Mitch?
56 years old.
Do you want to say, can you say what community he lives in?
He lives in southern New Hampshire.
In a Globe article today, it says that someone at the church where he worked described him as in tears when he was telling them about Father Gagan. What's your reaction to that, you know, coming to a settlement with him for abusing another child?
All I can say is the evidence we presented was overwhelming. So I don't know what kind of tears they were. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, we presented individuals who gave stories that were consistent, who gave facts that were consistent. My client has been holding this in since a child. When he was 18, he told his best friend. 30 years ago, he told his oldest brother. His oldest brother told another brother. 5 years ago, my client told another brother. His sister knew. Father Lane even presided at my client's mother's funeral. And it was just very difficult. There was an argument after the funeral between brothers not involving my client, the brothers of the family, because of Father Lane. Father Lane was very close to the family, and he gained access to my client through the parents.
So when the archdiocese calls this inconclusive, it's tear down one big.
Why did they pay a settlement? Why did they pay a 5-figure settlement? That's just spin control. If it was inconclusive, they wouldn't have paid anything. That's just that's just damage control on the part of the archdiocese. Why hasn't the archdiocese listed names of perpetrators up until recently, and why hasn't that list been all-inclusive? You're dealing with an entity that got caught allowing children to be sexually molested for decades. How can you have purportedly the most moral institution in the world acting the most immorally? We're not dealing with an entity that showed up one day and said, we have a problem within our ranks. I've been litigating for over 15 years with the Archdiocese of Boston, proven time and time and time again that they have priests that are sexual predators and that they have priests who enable sexual predators. How can you trust what they say? Why aren't they here today? Why aren't they apologizing? Why aren't they holding more healing masses? Why aren't they helping victims by having victims meet with them to discuss how to prevent pedophilia in the future? There is no end in sight to this pedophilia problem in the Archdiocese of Boston. People are pouring into my office. Before I came here this morning, unrelated to this article, a gentleman called me in tears. He'd been sexually molested by Father Talbot, and he wanted to meet with me today. Unrelated to the article, he hadn't heard anything on the news. I've discussed 12 priests I've settled dozens upon dozens of cases with the Archdiocese and other dioceses in the past year that don't involve these 12 priests, but involve numerous other pedophile priests or religious brothers. That's the broad picture. People just keep coming forward. A man 87 years old came to my office. He wanted to report being sexually molested by a priest when he was 6. He had been carrying it around for 81 years. We don't hear of older cases because the people have passed away. The victims have passed away. There's no end to this. It's just beginning. It's reared its ugly head, and it's just beginning. Where is the Archdiocese today? They should be here. They should be addressing these questions. We're doing their work for them by exposing these priests so children can be made safer and victims can heal.
Was there not an ability to bring criminal charges against any of these, or did your clients not want to go that route?
First of all, if the priest is dead, you cannot bring criminal charges.
Well,
Secondly, because of the age of the cases and the fact that the perpetrators had not left the state for a sufficient amount of time, the statute of limitations prevented criminal charges from being brought, which is why we need amendments to the statute of limitations, both criminal and civil, so that claims can be filed. And the Archdiocese should not have a problem with that, because if they claim that the evidence is inconclusive, then we can have a trial and show the evidence to the jury and let the jury decide whether it's inconclusive or not. But the Archdiocese doesn't want that. They oppose amending statute of limitations. Again, you're dealing with an entity that got caught allowing thousands of children to be sexually molested by hundreds, if not thousands of, I'm talking about the Archdiocese of Boston, of priests, hundreds of priests, and hundreds of supervising priests enabling the sexual abuse to occur. For as long as you can imagine, when a man comes to you and he says, I was molested 86 years ago, you know it's gone on for centuries. Any other questions?
Just to be clear, Mitchell, this is the same client who you said presided at his mother's funeral and married him and baptized 2 children?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's not unusual in these cases. I've had that happen quite a bit. There's an attachment, a spiritual attachment, where the victim feels guilty. Like, if I don't allow Father Lane or this priest to baptize my children, we're all going to burn in hell. Or if I don't let Father Lane preside at my mother's funeral, somebody's going to suspect that I was abused, and they may find out, and I don't want them to find out. The reasons are endless. Father Lane molested this child when he was 10 and 11, and then again when he was 15. It wasn't one incident. It was more than 10 incidents.
And he came to you in 2010?
Yes, he came to me about last year,
Okay.
early last year. Anything else?
My name is Robert Perone, and from 1963 to 1965 at St. Coleman's Rectory, next to the church on Wendell Avenue in Brockton, Mass., I was molested by Father Richard O'Donovan, or he goes by Ricard O'Donovan. Okay. He came into my mother's store, which was the Brockton Public Market. I would go there after school. My mother worked till 5 o'clock. I would bundle groceries for her. The laws were very lax back then. And I would get change to bring the bundles out to the cars. He would come through my mother's register. My mother had just remarried when I was 9 years old to a man who was Catholic, and his mother was French-Canadian Catholic, and very religious. Father Ricard O'Donovan knew this. He went to my mother and said, "Your son has not had his confirmation yet. I would like to give him private lessons. He's 9 years old. He needs to have confirmation." At that time, I was taking CCD classes after school because I was in a regular elementary school, or junior high at the time. I'm not sure where I was. And I was taking CCD classes at St. Coleman's and going to St. Coleman's Church myself. These supposed confirmation classes were held in the rectory for 2 years. I never received anything about confirmation. What I did receive was sexual abuse, and I was molested over 20 times by Father Ricard O'Donovan from 1963 to 1965. They moved him in 1965. They must have found out what was going on. He was moved to 1966 to 1974 at the Most Precious Blood in Hyde Park. Then he was moved again in 1975 to 1986 to the Sacred Heart in Weymouth. And then he was moved again in 1987 to 2000 in St. Doherty's in Wilmington, Mass. He died in 2002. The reason I'm here today is because I want to make sure that you have put this in print, exactly what I just told you. Not that his name is out there now, but this is in print. I want people to come forward that were molested. I want them to heal. I want them to get what I got out of this. I got closure. I was able to heal. I was able to deal with it after all these years of 48 years of torment and sexual abuse that I had 48 years ago, that tormented me all my life and changed my life completely. I was able to heal. If you were molested by this priest in any of these parishes that I have stated, please come forward. Get closure and be healed. Call Mitchell Garabedian and get closure. And if you need to talk to me, I will be available also to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Ann Barrett Doyle, A-N-N-E, Barrett, B-A-R-R-E-T-T, Doyle, D-O-Y-L-E. I'm a co-director of bishopaccountability.org. We're an archive that collects documents and data pertaining to the sex abuse crisis in the church. We're the largest such resource in the world, but we are based here in the Boston Archdiocese, and we were started by Boston parents. I'm going to start with a quote from Cardinal O'Malley. He recently said that, quote, his highest priority has been to provide outreach and care for all the survivors of clergy abuse and to do everything possible to make sure the abuse doesn't happen again. These are nice words, but nice words don't protect children and they don't heal victims. Cardinal O'Malley should be giving this press conference today. He found the victims' claims credible enough to pay substantial settlements, so why hasn't he informed the public of these allegations? And why hasn't he added the names of these clerics to his published list of accused priests? The victims have suffered enough. It shouldn't be their added burden to disclose the names of accused child molesters. One thing that still stuns us, as Mitchell Garabedian alluded to, is the unending pain of victims of child sexual abuse. The agony is particularly debilitating in people who were abused by clergy whose perpetrators have not been acknowledged by the church. In August, the Cardinal finally published a list of accused clerics, but he admitted that he had withheld the names of 91 archdiocesan clerics simply because their names hadn't already been made public and he was deciding to keep them private. And he even went on to say that the archdiocese had found some of the claims, quote, credible and compelling. It's just sad and wrong that in 2012, Sean O'Malley is still protecting the reputations of accused priests rather than choosing to heal victims and protect the children of this archdiocese. He has mastered the trick of partial and false transparency, and the victims and the public continue to pay the price. He can begin today to make full disclosures. We hope he will add the clerics who've been newly identified today to his public list, and that from now on, every time the Archdiocese settles with a victim, that he will issue a statement naming the cleric in the settlement and giving the details of the allegation, and also all the parishes where that cleric worked, so that, as Robert said, the victims in those parishes can feel validated and come forward and finally get closure. Thanks. And if you have any questions, by the way, on our website today, bishopaccountability.org, in the upper right-hand corner, it says what's new and noteworthy. We link to this list that we've passed out to you today, and we link to all those assignment records that my colleague Susie Nauman did. So if you have any questions about the assignment histories, we might be able to help you if Mitchell cannot.
Got something.
Thank you.
Okay. The Archdiocese told me in my case that they didn't want his name released, Ricard O'Donovan, by no means, because he is deceased, and they were afraid that it would upset his family. I would like you to take a good look at this picture over here. That's me at 9 years old, as a child. As a child that was molested. Don't you think I'm upset over this? I was the one that was molested. Do I care about his family? Not really. Do I care about him? No. I wish he was alive today so I could see him face to face. Unfortunately, I can't. Thank you very much.
Robert, can I just ask you, how do you feel about the church basically not admitting the guilt? I mean, they did come to a settlement, but it's not an admission of guilt.
It's more than outrageous. It's more than, it's ludicrous. I mean, how can they not come forward? Look at all the victims. Is everybody lying? Come on. It's just ridiculous. I don't understand it. Nobody would understand it. I mean, I'm coming forward telling you about these parishes that he was in because I want people to know if they were in this parish and they were molested to come forward. They have a right to come forward for themselves. Did I answer your question?
There's one question.
Robert, can you tell me when you came forward and what made you decide to come forward?
I came forward 2 years ago, and the reason I came forward later was because I had dealt with a lot of demons in my life. A lot of things happened to me as an adult because of this, and I won't go into it. I corrected those situations, became a better person, was able to deal with myself on a level where I could come forward and face this and get closure. The only way you're going to get closure and feel at peace with yourself is to come forward. Talk about it. Don't hold this in. The more you hold it in, the worse you're going to be. It's going to eat you alive. That's why I'm pleading to you to put this information out. It's important that people know what rectories and churches he was in his later years, up to the year 2000. It's very important to me. It's very important to the victims, because I know there are more victims out there. Thank you.
Mr. Perron, how do you spell your last name?
P-E-R-R-O-N. Robert Perron.
How old are you, sir?
57 years old. This happened 48 years ago.
Do you wish to say where you're from?
Originally, I'm from Brockton, Massachusetts.
Okay.
I lived actually 3 streets away from the rectory on Henry Street.
Did you ever consider telling a parent or anyone at that time?
When you're involved with a priest that's a pedophile, he coerces you into telling you that you're not loved by your parents. My mother was divorced. She just got remarried. She was trying to have children. I was a latchkey kid. I grew up very fast. I was pulled into this and told.
Your mother wasn't Catholic.
My mother wasn't Catholic. She married a Catholic. She was Protestant. Okay, so I had really no religion before she remarried. I was pulled into this by him, coerced by him, and he told me that he loved me, not to tell anybody, that I wasn't loved at home, nobody loved me. I was a very lonely child. I was pushed aside, not intentionally, it just happened that way. Under circumstances, I don't blame anybody for that, of course not. But the circumstances were right, the priest was there, he knew it, and he took advantage of it. I mean, the audacity of a priest coming into the store where your mother worked and tried to basically take your kid away to molest him. That was his plan. He had the intention, he had the ability, and he had the opportunity. And he did it. How many other ones out there that he did it to? I don't know. Any other questions?
So it was such a different time too. I mean, telling somebody that a priest molested you, just like, who's going to believe you back then, right?
Well, she had just remarried to a French Canadian. I mean, his mother was from Canada. Very religious woman, Delia Perron, bless her soul. She took me in as a grandchild, never asked any questions. Lovely woman. Okay, never asked questions. I was adopted by my father. I have his name, my stepfather's name. I'm adopted.
You know, you say it's a different time, but it wasn't a different time for priests and the supervisors of priests back then.
No, but I mean, for the ability for a victim, I think, to come forward and say.
Oh, it's difficult every day at any time for any victim. It's very difficult because it's a deep, dark, ugly secret where the victim feels unnecessary guilt, shame, and embarrassment. It's up to the adult. It's up to the supervisor of the adult to do something to prevent this from happening. It's all about prevention. It wasn't a different time in the 1960s and the 1970s. Sexual abuse was not. It was frowned upon back then, and it should be, and it should have been. But where were the priests? Where were these people who claimed to have been holier than thou? Where were their supervisors? Where was cardinal law? The evidence in the Gagan cases shows that cardinal law knew that Father John J. Gagan was a sexual abuser, yet he transferred him to another parish without warning parishioners. Why didn't he err on the side of caution? He knew that Father John J. Gagan was a sexual pedophile, but yet he transferred him to St. Julia's in Weston. He knew it, and that's the evidence I have in my office, and it is writing, and it's in writing, and I believe it's on bishopaccountability.org too. My list now totals 129 priests, religious order priests, archdiocesan priests, religious members of religious organizations that have credibly been found to have sexually molested children. I'm one person, one lawyer. 129 pedophiles associated with the Catholic Church. More than 1,000 victims are represented by me, have been represented by me. Ann, do you have anything else to say?
No, I think that about covers it. I will say, interestingly enough, yesterday the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops came out with an updated report on how many priests have been accused in the last year. And the net newly identified is around 160 or so in 2011. And it's remarkable that many priests, I mean, there are now over 6,000 accused priests acknowledged by the Catholic Church. They claim that they have heard reports, plausible or credible, against more than 6,000 accused priests. So it's sad, but it's not surprising that an attorney is still getting, fresh reports.
People are pouring in. It's not like I get a call every couple of weeks. Constantly. And I want them to call me. I want them to try to heal. But it's simply amazing. Excuse me. Simply amazing. Thank you for coming.